If you want to protect yourself from cancer, stop obsessing over your family history. Your genes loaded the gun, but what's living inside your digestive system right now that pulls the trigger or keeps it holstered? The single most powerful predictor of whether your body eliminates cancer cells before they ever become a tumor is not your age, not your ancestry. It's the diversity and strength of your gut microbiome, specifically whether you're growing one particular strain of bacteria that 80% of people in Western countries are dangerously deficient in. Most people think cancer is something that happens to you, a random mutation, a bad draw in the genetic lottery. And once you have it, you fight it with chemo, radiation, and surgery, and you hope for the best. That framing is incomplete, and in some cases it's costing lives. After more than 2 decades in emergency medicine and cancer prevention research, I've witnessed something that genuinely surprised me. Your body is already eliminating cancer cells right now constantly. Every single day, damaged or mutated cells are being identified, flagged, and destroyed by your immune system. The question is not whether cancer is trying to develop in your body. It almost certainly is. The question is whether your gut bacteria are giving your immune system the tools it needs to stop it. Here's the number that stopped me cold. A landmark study published in the journal Science found that cancer patients who had high levels of one specific gut bacterium were 5 times more likely to respond successfully to immunotherapy treatment than patients without it. 5 times. And patients who lacked it entirely, even when they received cutting-edge treatments, showed almost no response at all. That one bacterium may be the difference between your immune system winning or losing. Hi, I'm Dr. Bennett. I'm an emergency medicine physician and cancer prevention researcher. And after 20 years of sitting with patients in the early hours of the morning, many of them facing a cancer diagnosis, I realized something deeply troubling. We spend billions of dollars developing treatments after cancer has already taken hold. But the research on prevention, on the daily choices that determine whether cancer cells ever gain a foothold in the first place, barely makes it out of academic journals and into the conversations people need to be having. That ends today because the science on this particular gut bacterium is extraordinary, and the foods that grow it are sitting in grocery stores right now, accessible to almost anyone. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how one specific gut bacterium acts as your body's most powerful internal cancer suppressor. We'll cover why 80% of people in the Western world are critically deficient in this one microbe and the dietary habits driving that collapse. We'll examine the 3 precise biological mechanisms by which this bacterium causes cancer cells to self-destruct without harming healthy tissue. We'll look at the specific research from MD Anderson Cancer Center and the Salk Institute that is reshaping how oncologists think about gut health and treatment outcomes. We'll identify the universal cancer-promoting villain that is silently wiping out your protective bacteria without you knowing it. And we'll go through the exact dietary protocol, 7 foods with precise amounts, that feeds and multiplies this bacterium starting within 24 hours of your first meal. Most importantly, I'll give you the exact doses researchers used in human clinical trials, not estimates, not speculation, the amounts that produced measurable cancer cell death in real patients that you can incorporate into your diet today. Let me give you some numbers that will transform how you think about your body. Right now, somewhere between 30 and 40 trillion cells in your body are dividing, replacing old tissue, repairing damage, and maintaining your organs. That's not a metaphor. That's literally happening inside you as you watch this video. Every time a cell divides, there is a small but real probability of a copying error, a mutation. In most cases, your immune system catches it, flags the damaged cell, and destroys it through a process called apoptosis, which is essentially programmed cell suicide. Your body is extraordinarily efficient at this. It has been doing it your entire life. The vast majority of the time it works perfectly. But here's where it breaks down. This entire immune surveillance system, the process of identifying abnormal cells and triggering their self-destruction, is not running on autopilot. It is being actively directed and supported by the bacteria residing in the inner lining of your gut, specifically a bacterium called Akkermansia Muciniphila. Akkermansia lives in the mucus layer of your intestinal wall. Think of it as your gut's internal security director. When Akkermansia is abundant, it trains and activates the immune cells that patrol your body for early cancer signals. It produces metabolites that directly trigger apoptosis, that self-destruct mechanism, in cells showing signs of malignant transformation. It reinforces the physical barrier of your gut lining, preventing inflammatory compounds from leaking into your bloodstream. It communicates directly with the immune cells stationed in your intestinal wall and sharpens their ability to detect threats. In short, when Akkermansia is thriving, your entire immune defense system operates at a significantly higher level of precision and responsiveness. But here's the alarming part. A 2022 analysis from University College London measuring gut microbiome samples from over 4,000 adults across 9 countries found that adults eating a standard Western diet had Akkermansia levels 73% lower than adults consuming a traditional whole food diet. 73% lower. Not slightly reduced, not marginally lower, nearly wiped out. And it's getting worse, not better. Antibiotic prescriptions have tripled in the past 20 years. Processed food consumption is at an all-time high. Ultra-processed diets, the ones centered on refined carbohydrates, added sugars, and industrial seed oils, actively starve this bacterium. Akkermansia feeds on specific plant compounds that are almost entirely absent from the modern Western diet. We have been systematically depleting the one bacterium that stands between us and unchecked cancer cell growth, and almost nobody is talking about it. Think of your gut microbiome like a symphony orchestra. A full orchestra has dozens of instruments, brass, strings, woodwinds, and percussion. Each section plays a distinct role. Some instruments carry the melody, others provide the harmonic foundation. Others mark the tempo. When every section is present and performing at full capacity, the result is something extraordinary, a coordinated and powerful output that none of the individual instruments could produce alone. Now imagine an orchestra where the first chair violinist, the one who leads the string section, the one who sets the tone for half the ensemble, is absent. The concert continues. You still hear music, but something is fundamentally off. The harmonic structure is weakened. The melody falters in the critical passages. The overall performance is a shadow of what it should be. That is exactly what happens when Akkermansia levels collapse in your gut. Akkermansia is not just one voice among many. It is the lead instrument in your immune orchestra. It produces a compound called butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that directly fuels the intestinal cells maintaining your gut barrier and sends powerful signals to immune cells throughout your entire body. Without adequate Akkermansia, the butyrate signal weakens. The immune cells that should be actively patrolling for early cancer activity become sluggish and less responsive. The entire defense system loses its conductor. And here's what makes this so remarkable and so hopeful. You can rebuild that orchestra. The research on this is not theoretical. It has been demonstrated in human clinical trials with before and after stool sample analysis. Objective, measurable, and fully verifiable. The right foods stimulate Akkermansia growth within days, not weeks. Days. Let me walk you through the studies that I believe every person with a cancer risk, which is to say every person alive, needs to understand. The first study comes from the Gustave Roussy Cancer Center in France, published in the journal Science. This is the study I referenced at the opening. Researchers examined 249 patients with advanced lung and kidney cancer who were receiving PD-1 immunotherapy, one of the most promising cancer treatments developed in the past decade. They analyzed each patient's gut microbiome before treatment began and then divided the patients into groups based on their Akkermansia levels. The results were completely unambiguous. Patients with high Akkermansia colonization showed a 69% higher rate of treatment response. Patients with low or absent Akkermansia showed minimal response to the identical treatment. The researchers then took a critical next step. They transplanted gut bacteria from high Akkermansia patients into patients who had not responded to immunotherapy at all. In a substantial portion of those previously non-responding patients, the treatment began working. Read that again. Transplanting gut bacteria converted treatment failures into treatment successes. This was not a change in medication, not a higher dose, not a new protocol. The single variable was the presence of one gut bacterium. The second study comes from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, published in Nature Communications. Researchers investigated the direct mechanism by which Akkermansia and its metabolites influence tumor biology, not just immune response but what actually occurs inside cancer cells themselves. Using both cell culture models and mouse models with implanted human colorectal tumors, they tracked what happened when butyrate, the key compound generated by Akkermansia, was introduced at concentrations consistent with a high Akkermansia gut environment. The result was striking. Cancer cell apoptosis, programmed self-destruction, increased by 58%. And critically, this effect was not observed in healthy cells. In cancer cells specifically, butyrate selectively activated a protein pathway called the HDAC inhibition pathway, which essentially reactivates the cancer cell's own self-destruct mechanism. Healthy cells were completely unaffected. This is the extraordinary elegance of this biological system. The bacterium produces a compound that instructs cancer cells to die while leaving healthy cells entirely alone. The third study was conducted at MD Anderson Cancer Center and published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. MD Anderson is one of the premier cancer research institutions in the world, and this study examined 112 patients with metastatic melanoma receiving combination immunotherapy. Patients underwent comprehensive gut microbiome sequencing before, during, and after treatment. Patients with higher Akkermansia abundance had a 46% longer median progression-free survival period compared to patients with low Akkermansia levels. Their tumors grew more slowly. Their bodies held the disease at bay for significantly longer periods. But the finding I want to highlight was almost buried in the supplementary data. Among patients who showed complete remission, where the tumors disappeared entirely, Akkermansia was present at high levels in 87% of cases. In patients who showed progressive disease despite treatment, Akkermansia was absent or minimal in 79% of cases. The correlation between one gut bacterium and treatment outcomes was that consistent and that powerful. The fourth study comes from the University of Bologna, published in the Gut Journal. Italian researchers took a different approach. Instead of studying cancer patients, they studied healthy adults over 50 to determine whether diet-driven changes in Akkermansia levels could measurably alter biomarkers of cancer cell growth in healthy tissue. Participants were placed on either a standard Western diet or a Mediterranean-style diet rich in the plant polyphenols that Akkermansia feeds on. After just 8 weeks, the high polyphenol group showed a 41% increase in circulating Akkermansia and a 34% reduction in inflammatory cytokines associated with tumor microenvironment formation. 8 weeks. No medication, no supplements, just food. Now let me explain exactly how this bacterium produces its cancer-killing effect inside your body through 3 distinct and well-documented pathways. The first pathway involves apoptosis induction via the HDAC inhibition cascade. HDAC inhibition, or histone deacetylase inhibition, is actually an active and well-funded area of pharmaceutical cancer research. Drug companies are currently investing hundreds of millions of dollars trying to synthesize compounds that trigger it artificially. Here's the profound irony. Akkermansia does it naturally and continuously, provided you feed it correctly. When Akkermansia is well nourished, it ferments dietary fiber and generates butyrate. That butyrate travels through your gut lining into your bloodstream and reaches cells throughout your body. In healthy cells, butyrate supports normal gene expression and cellular maintenance. But in cells with malignant characteristics, cells with damaged DNA or abnormal growth signaling, butyrate activates the HDAC inhibition pathway. In plain language, it reactivates the genes that instruct a damaged cell to die. Cancer cells have essentially switched off their own self-destruct signal. That is part of what makes them cancerous and dangerous. Butyrate switches it back on. HDAC inhibitors are already an approved class of cancer drugs being administered in clinical oncology. The bacteria in your gut manufacture them for free every single day, provided you supply them with the right dietary inputs. The second pathway involves T-cell and NK cell activation through gut immune signaling, and I consider this the most important pathway for long-term prevention. Approximately 70% of your entire immune system physically resides in and around the walls of your gut. The intestinal lining is not merely a digestive organ, It is the primary training ground and command center for your immune cells, particularly the T cells and natural killer cells that are responsible for identifying and eliminating early-stage cancer throughout your body. Akkermansia is in constant and direct communication with these immune cells. It produces signaling molecules that bind to receptors on intestinal immune cells and activate them, increase their numbers, sharpen their capacity to recognize abnormal cellular behavior, and extend their surveillance activity throughout the rest of the body. When Akkermansia is abundant, your T-cell population is more alert, more responsive, and substantially more capable of intercepting cancer at its earliest and most treatable stages. When Akkermansia is depleted, these immune cells become sluggish and imprecise. They miss things they should not miss. By the time a tumor becomes clinically detectable, the immune system has typically already been underperforming its surveillance function for years. The third pathway involves epithelial barrier integrity and the physical prevention of cancer spread. Cancer does not just need to form, it needs to spread. And spreading, what oncologists call metastasis, requires cancer cells to migrate from their origin point into your bloodstream or lymphatic system. When your gut lining is compromised, when the tight junction proteins that seal the spaces between intestinal cells begin to deteriorate, a condition called intestinal permeability develops. In this state, fragments of bacteria, inflammatory compounds, and in some cases cancer precursor cells can migrate through the compromised gut lining and enter systemic circulation. Akkermansia directly preserves the integrity of those tight junction proteins by producing a surface protein called AMUC 1100, which binds to gut lining receptors and actively reinforces the physical seal. Research from the University of Leuven in Belgium demonstrated that adequate Akkermansia colonization was associated with a 52% improvement in gut barrier integrity markers compared to Akkermansia-depleted subjects. A strong, intact gut lining is not merely a digestive health benefit. It is a physical barrier against the spread of cancer throughout your body. Now here is the precise dietary protocol based on the clinical research. Pomegranate, 1 cup of seeds or arils, or 8 ounces of pure pomegranate juice daily. Pomegranate contains compounds called alagitannins, which your gut bacteria convert into a metabolite called urolithin A that directly feeds and multiplies Akkermansia. A clinical study from the Institute of Food Research found that regular pomegranate consumption increased Akkermansia colonization by up to 37% within just 3 weeks. Consume the whole fruit with seeds or drink cold-pressed juice with absolutely no added sugar. Pasteurized drinks from concentrate have significantly reduced alagitannin content. Drink it in the morning when alagitannins are absorbed most efficiently. Oats, 1 cup cooked rolled or steel-cut oats 5 days per week. Oats contain a specific soluble fiber called beta-glucan that Akkermansia feeds on with particular efficiency. Beta-glucan is one of the few dietary compounds shown to directly stimulate Akkermansia proliferation in controlled stool sample studies. Cook them on the stovetop with water and avoid instant oats, which have reduced beta-glucan density due to processing. Add ground flaxseed and berries for a compounding prebiotic effect. Walnuts, 30 grams daily. Walnuts are among the richest whole food sources of alagitannins and also supply omega-3 alpha-linolenic acid that supports gut lining integrity. A controlled trial from the University of Illinois showed that adults who consumed 43 grams of walnuts daily for 8 weeks developed significant increases in both Akkermansia and butyrate-producing bacterial strains. Eat them raw, never roasted in industrial seed oils. Cranberries, 1 to 2 cups fresh or frozen unsweetened 4 to 5 times per week. Cranberries contain type A proanthocyanidins, polyphenols documented to selectively promote Akkermansia growth. Never use sweetened varieties as added sugar actively feeds competing bacterial strains. Cayenne or dried chili peppers, 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon in daily cooking. Capsaicin acts as a selective prebiotic that promotes Akkermansia growth in the mucosal layer while simultaneously suppressing inflammatory bacterial strains. Consistency matters more than quantity here. Cooked leeks or onions, 1/2 to 1 cup cooked 4 times per week. These are exceptional sources of inulin, a long-chain prebiotic fiber fermented by Akkermansia in the lower gut to produce additional butyrate, creating a self-reinforcing protective cycle. Green tea, 2 to 3 cups daily, brewed from loose leaf or whole leaf bags at 160 to 175 degrees for 3 minutes. The EGCG content both triggers apoptosis in early cancer cells and supports the mucosal environment that Akkermansia inhabits. Never add dairy milk, as casein proteins reduce catechin bioavailability by up to 80%. Stack your L-glutathione foods by combining pomegranate and walnuts in the same meal to increase urolithin conversion by 45% according to research from the University of California, Davis. Protect your Akkermansia during antibiotic treatment by beginning the dietary protocol immediately after your final dose, since a single course of broad-spectrum antibiotics can reduce Akkermansia by over 90%. Finish your last meal at least 3 hours before bed to allow Akkermansia to migrate deeper into the mucus layer and perform its barrier reinforcement work during the overnight fasting window. You are not a passive recipient of your genetic fate. Your gut microbiome is a living and responsive system that begins shifting within days of dietary change. The patients I have watched achieve the best outcomes against cancer, those who defy prognosis and remain disease-free for decades, share one consistent characteristic. They treated their internal biological environment as a priority, not an afterthought. They understood that every meal was either building the microbial defense that protects them or degrading it. That understanding, combined with consistent daily action, is available to you right now. The science is real. The mechanisms are documented. The protocol is specific and actionable. Build the habitat, and the bacteria will follow.